trying to make you feel better.
Yes, I am.
You're in the bucket.
Okay, so we're finished with our action items. We're going to now go to the consent items that were pulled, and I'm going to go through the ones that were like administratively pulled first, and then we'll get to the ones that you pulled, Sarah.
Okay.
So we pulled the minutes. Carolyn, you want to
Yes.
share with us?
So on the minutes, we had one portion of the minutes that, from the general meeting, that there was one item that we inadvertently left off the vote. And we believe that vote was unanimous, but we want to make sure. And so we're wanting to bring the minutes for the regular board meeting in May back for your consideration and approval at the June 27th meeting. However, we believe that the minutes for the special meeting are intact and correct as is, and so if you would be so kind as to approve those, should you choose, then we would be just bringing back the regular meeting minutes from May for your approval at the next board meeting.
Okay.
So, just to clarify, so we're going to not approve the minutes that are on page 1 through 5?
Correct. The May 9th meeting, we will postpone approval until June 27th. We'll bring them back with that one addition, which was actually action number 112-16. It was on page 4, and there was no vote recorded, and so we just want to make sure that we record that accurately. We believe that that vote was unanimous, but we just want to confirm that and bring it back for approval on the 27th. We do, however, believe that the minutes on page 6, reflected on page 6 for the special meeting at Wagner Ranch, are just fine and ready to go.
Okay, so we just need a motion that approves the May 20th minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from May 20th, page 6.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so consent item A is approved as amended. We'll now move to consent item J. Agreement with UC Regents for BaySci professional development.
Sure, so was
Aye.
We were going to go through the
the
administrative
administrative ones first. Pardon me, that, got it. All right, so for J, and we might want to look at J and K, I might recommend looking at J and K together. Those were agreements with University of California Regents for BaySci, and there was simply a funding change that we wanted to note for your consideration. So I might ask Kathy Marshall to please explain that slight change to us.
Absolutely. So for item J, I wanted to note that through our planning and partnership process, the parents clubs have willingly offered to cover the training costs for teachers participating in the summer program. And so on this particular item, it lists one-time mandated cost reimbursement, but I really want to recognize and acknowledge that it is parents clubs who will be covering this cost. And that is the same for item K. Item K is a complete package agreement for the entire year, but within that it includes some summer training costs that will take place in August, and the parents clubs again have willingly offered to pick that piece up, which under the financial considerations would say that Parents Clubs is providing $3,300 in fees towards this agreement, and then the mandated cost reimbursement would be $35,700.
Thank you. Okay.
So,
Yeah, I'm gonna do them one at a time, just to keep it separate so that we can do public comment, and
But
so
then we
let's
have
just focus on that first one, item
J.
item J, on page 33. Does anyone have any questions on that one? Any comments?
So, I do have a question.
Okay.
One-time mandated cost $6,000, that's just for this year? It doesn't, it's not talking about whether we're doing this in a 3-year plan or not? Or what?
Correct, it's an agreement for the Orinda BaySci Institute that will be taking place next week.
Oh, okay, got it.
And that cost will be funded by the parent clubs, which is the change. Okay, any other questions from the board? Any comments from the public?
Just real quick, Charles Henry, your president. I want to just thank the parent club for their donation towards the opportunity at BaySci. Thank you, and I will be participating, so thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, any comments from the board? Otherwise, this item's up for action. This is just J.
I move that we approve the agreement with the University of California Regents for BaySci Professional Development, item J.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, you've already discussed and told us what the change is with the split with the parent club's funding the summer training for $3,300. Are there any questions from the board on this item?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
I have two questions. One is, so she already said the funding. I just wanted to clarify, this one also is a longer process description item, and this is just for this coming school year?
Yes. For 2016-17, for the entire year.
Okay, and then we would monitor how it's going to see if we wanted to. I guess the reason I'm asking is some of the things that said mandated cost funding had said 3 years, and it was sort of confusing. Was it a 3-year plan or doing it in 1 year? But I think you just stated it's just for this year. So then the other question or comment that I have has to do with the description on page 43, where it says Schedule A, Scope of Work. And it looks great, but it looks like a lot of this is the district level, and then the science leadership team, and then item, there's A, B, C, D. D mentions 2 teachers. So other than the science leadership team, I'm wondering how many teachers are directly involved in this. I mean, I'm all for it and I think it's great. So that's one thing. And then also, you know, I just want to include staff when we can. I want to make sure that whatever great work is done here gets communicated out to all teachers or science teachers or anyone who could use it. And I'm also wondering if there's, you know, I don't know that we have any opportunity as a board to give input in terms of our science goals and what we're trying to accomplish, but that might be one thing we want to consider in our planning in the future board workshops. So going back to the teachers.
So this is a similar agreement that the board has approved each year annually with BaySci. At least for the past 2 years, we have broken it down. And if you look at A, B, and C, in actuality, the district leadership team does include teachers that participate in that process. The technical assistance under C really focuses on how BaySci is supporting our district leaders, principals, and teacher leaders to spread the professional development across our district. And so although there's not a particular day associated with that, that's ongoing. They also support us with the parent education. So they're at our beck and call when we need something, and it's part of the goals that we have in our LCAP. They are supporting that work.
Great, thank you. And then number D, where it mentions 2 teachers, I was just surprised that it said 2 teachers and not more. Can you explain what those 2 teachers are, or what that means?
Yes, we have 2 teachers who are available to join the other BaySci cohorts that we've had in previous years. The session this year is August 1st through 5th. And so we wanted to be sure that teachers that were available could participate. They participate along with other districts, so they're not just having the training by themselves.
Oh, I see.
And then because we have other teachers attending the June training, and we also have teachers that have attended the previous training, they will join in with that group, and so they will continue. It's just growing our teacher knowledge with those teachers that are available at the time that the teacher leadership is being held.
Okay, great, thank you. And I just want to say again, I'm all in support of this, and I know that our parents have wanted to see more excitement in science, and so I'm glad to see this. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Any comments from the public?
Thank you.
This item is on for action.
Charles, are you one of those teachers?
How did you guess?
Yes.
Thank you, Charles.
I move that we approve item K, agreement with University of California Regents for BaySci partnership for 2016-2017.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, now we'll go to the last administratively pulled item, which is X on the revised agenda, the licensing agreement with Dreambox Learning.
So with regard to the licensing agreement, on the actual page of the agreement, there is just a typo that needs to be brought to your attention, and I do believe you have a revised agreement in front of you that shows the change. The change is in cell 2, where it lists under description Orinda and Wagner. It's been replaced to say Sleepy Hollow and Wagner. And then under cell 3, it's just a correction of how Del Rey spells their name. There are no other changes to the agreement.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Comments from the public? This item is on for action as revised.
I move that we approve item X, licensing agreement with Dreambox Learning for Mathematics Instructional Support.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That is unanimous. Now we will go back to agreement, consent item I, agreement with Kidpower for professional development and parent education. That's page 28. Sarah, that was you.
Yes, thank you. So I am glad to see Kidpower on here. I have personal experience with them. When my kids were young, I took them to Kidpower workshops. And I know this refers to our previous board meeting, and then it continues on. The question I had, or what I wanted to hear more about, was, so I guess at the previous board meeting, I was probably assuming that, a description would come back to us, and this is a description. But on the second page, page 29, it says the committee of parents representing each schools is meant to develop a communication plan and outreach for attendance and participation in the 16-17 parent workshops. So I presume, is that the next 2 pages? There's a 3 pages description from Kidpower, or was this, when it says a communication plan, I'm just wanting to make sure. I think this is a great program. It does say it's going to cost $11,000, but we do want to make sure we have good communication and encourage parents to attend, because I know sometimes we have great meetings and then very few parents attending. So I just wanted to hear a little more about that.
Well, wasn't the communication plan just part of the committee recommendations that we approved, and this particular contract is just the Kidpower piece of it? I mean, that's my understanding.
Oh, so maybe I'm confused.
I thought that was why in bold they put the hosting teacher trainings, parent workshops, and/or parent-student workshops on page 28 on the agenda bill. and that this contract relates to that piece of the overall safety committee, sort of their report and the results of their report and some of the changes that they discuss. I mean, Carolyn, you're
Yeah,
on that committee, so maybe you can speak to
I
that.
can comment on that, but I'm not sure I heard your question
Um,
accurately anyway.
Well, my question had to do with, it refers to a communication plan and outreach. I'm not sure if Kidpower is doing all of that, if that's included in these 3 pages, or if we're having, the responsibility of communicating about these meetings on the parents, parent club presidents, principal, district, so by approving this, we're approving this contract with Kidpower, but I'm a little.
Yeah, so I think we're just looking at this one piece of the safety committee's work, and that is the part where Kidpower, that they were recommending that Kidpower would host these trainings
Yeah,
and workshops.
So I'm hearing your question as you want to know what the communication plan is. So the communication plan, as I remember it, is
But
that
I think that might be going outside of the scope of this.
Well,
contract, so that's
this
not a
is
little
for
concern.
16-17 services in our district. We are going to hire them to do workshops.
Like I said, I think the communication plan is part of the safety committee group's recommendation, and that this contract relates to only one of their recommendations, which is the Kidpower trainings
Okay,
and workshops.
I understand what you're saying
So
now.
it's not,
But I
it's not
think
saying this is reflecting.
maybe this isn't the communication plan, but if we're going to approve this contract for $11,000 and have Kidpower come, which I think is wonderful, I guess I just want to also ask, how are we communicating about these workshops? Let's make sure that we get the word out there so people
And I think
can.
under the what the committee was recommending did involve a communication plan, which is why you're seeing that language in here, and that will be done. But that's not what the contract, this particular contract's about. This particular contract is just with Kidpower so that we can get that piece going. Okay, it's not,
It feels like you don't want to answer my question a little bit. I guess I'm just saying, I like this, I just want to make sure, if we want to get our money's worth, let's make sure to communicate well to the parents.
I
Is
think we're
that-
all in agreement on that. I'm just saying that that's not what this contract is. This contract's with Kidpower, and the communication of the trainings and everything will be done as part of that, because that's what the committee was recommending, and we would do it
the
anyway.
the committee did discuss communication plans.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm asking anything about rocket science. I just, wanted to make sure if we're going to approve this, let's make sure we communicate well. We usually say, oh yes, we're going to do that. The principals or the parents clubs or the superintendent will send out a constant contact. That's all I'm kind of asking.
So I can say that we've had 2 meetings with parents representing each school, primarily the Think First coordinators who really have the most direct contact with all Think First volunteers and with getting the word out. Those meetings were primarily to discuss these workshops, which there was great enthusiasm and an eagerness to make sure that if we move forward that there would be what's the best way to get the most parents participating. We've developed a survey that's going to be going out to the Think First volunteers that includes questions about best times. We've talked about offering alternate times of sessions at each school site so we can meet the needs of varying parents in the fall. And we're meeting again in August, the first week of August, to roll out the flyers, the information, to get it in e-news. Kidpower is very willing to partner with us in the communication and what that looks like. So the purpose of having it in here was so that, to let the board know that we are in the process.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any questions from the board? Comments from the public?
Just really quick, in the 11 years that I've been here, I'm Charles Shannon, president. I think first, parent volunteers have been great about communication, and I don't think that when our parents don't participate, they're not interested. I just think that, in my experience, we have very busy parents, oftentimes both working, and sometimes it's a matter of they weren't able to make that particular session, but if you have options, and it sounds like you're going to, it'll increase our chances, our likelihood of getting more participation. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? This item's on for action.
I move we adopt action item, consent item?
Consent item.
Consent item I, the agreement with Kidpower.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? It's unanimous. We will now move on to consent item L, agreement with Shaw HR Consulting, Inc., page 44. Sarah?
Yes, thank you. So page 44, we have this contract with Shaw. So I guess I wanted to bring up a couple of things. One is that this, and I understand that we have a need for this for various reasons. But I'm looking at the fact that it's, for one thing, it's a contract with, it says for an independent contractor agreement, and Shaw HR Consulting is a consulting company, so I don't know if there's a reason we aren't hiring them just as a consultant as opposed to an independent contractor. And then more importantly, on the first page, it says through December 31st, 2016, not to exceed $10,000. That not to exceed, I didn't see anywhere in the contract itself. So I think if we, knowing that if we approve this, it doesn't come back to us. If we wanted it to not exceed $10,000, I think we need to specify that. And I don't know if there's pros and cons to that others want to comment on. And going back to my original point about it being an independent contractor agreement, I think it would just be helpful that we understand, is that mean they're going to still operate as a consultant, or what does that actually mean in terms of how they're going to work or operate in our district?
And Ms. Woodman, I know this item was under your name, but I might jump in here just because I have worked with Shaw HR Consulting in the past. And I did, Ms. Butler, you kindly did let me know that this was a question that you had. And so I was able to just do a little bit of research. It doesn't really answer your question, but just to know that this Shaw HR Consulting has worked not only in my previous district, Manhattan Beach Unified, but also Napa Valley College up here. And in both contracts that I found, they were listed the same way as we have listed them, which is for an independent contractor professional services. So I know that in the past, the services were very helpful when we had employees who had medical issues, situations like high-risk pregnancies or medical issues that required accommodations, whether they were classified or certificated, so that we could really support the employees in returning to work to the extent possible. Ms. Shaw is very knowledgeable in both the federal and state laws with regard to employee interactive process and accommodations, and also in developing functional job analysis when there is a situation when you want to really look at what specific aspects of a job can be accommodated and what might not be accommodated. And those are really extensive levels of expertise that would be difficult. I know I oversaw HR without having the special education part added to my job, and I still found Ms. Shaw's services, her firm services, very advantageous and helpful for the more complicated cases. So I would just say that, but I really wasn't able to get information why it's listed as an independent contractor or why Michelle has the contract written that way. I just know that other districts and colleges have it written that way, and the services provided were very top-notch, so.
Julie, you want me to make a little stab at it from a contract point of view? So I think one of the reasons might be that this is just speaking in contract language, that when you hire someone to do work for you, you have to classify them either as an independent contractor or as an employee, because your payment would be different to them. So a consultant is just a subset. It's just a different way of calling an entity that is an independent contractor. I don't think there's any legal significance other than what the contract's trying to do is establish, oh, we're paying you as an independent contractor, you're going to take care of all your tax liabilities for that. I think but that's my pretty strong guess, is that's the language. You would use consultants for that differentiation. So it doesn't mean that it's any different in terms of the scope of their services. It's just their legal responsibility is a matter of tax and corporate law.
Although, for example, I guess I was thinking our architect, we hire our architect he's a consultant. It's a contract to do a specific amount of work, and we're hiring him as a consultant as opposed to this.
But for the same purposes, he'd be an independent contractor for the purposes of payments. So I don't think there's any difference between the two.
All right, well, I didn't mean to get into legalese. I was curious, but your answer also says that it's acting as an employee, more or less.
Not.
Not
I'm saying not
an
as an employee. So there are two categories. You're either employee or independent contractor.
Okay.
I do think
And
so.
yet that's very different than like the architect contract that we have for our architect, which is just for a specific scope of work and for an exact fee. This
But
one's-
again, they're not an employee of the district, they're an independent contractor, it's just a different type of contract.
Right.
I would also add that the scope of this particular contractor's activities are listed on the agenda bill, and they encompass the interactive process, professional services to aid in the interactive process, which is something very specific to HR, development of essential functions, job analyses, and generalized human resource support. So that's the scope of the work, not to exceed 10,000, and that will show up on a PO, purchase order, when it's developed, should you choose to agree to this arrangement. And the specific charges from this professional are listed in the contract. So those are the charges when an invoice is submitted. It's submitted along with backup information. When did that person work? For how many hours did they work? And then their charge is reflected per the contract. And then we have stipulation of a PO which says not to exceed $10,000. So they simply won't get paid more than that within a certain percentage. Sometimes
Okay,
POs.
because having this state that it goes through December 2016 seems like a long time. It could add up to more than 10,000, so I guess I'm a little confused. Are you saying I guess.
The board wouldn't be approving. We're not asking you to approve an amount greater than $10,000. And we're saying that to encompass the time period between now and December 31st is what we have as a contract term.
So if, for example, we needed HY Consulting to do a lot of work, more than we anticipated, and it would go over $10,000 before December 31st, then what would happen?
You get a new agenda
Come
bill
back-
before you.
Come back to the board.
Right, so there's some leeway when it comes to purchase orders, but not a whole lot. So then it would come before you again as an agenda bill item.
Okay. And the purchase orders you're talking about, that's what's in the warrants. Is that right, the warrants?
I'm not sure how to answer that because I don't know what the warrants.
She's asking us what
Purchase order is part of it.
She's asking if, well, the bills from her.
Invoices.
The invoices would show up on the warrants, but unless you were adding them all up, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know
what
whether they got to
exceeded,
10,000 or not.
Except for the fact that the purchase order will say that it won't exceed 10,000 without it coming back to us. Plus or minus a small percentage
Plus or
that
minus
is
a small.
allowed
That-
under the
that's-
purchase order agreement.
Why you see service agreements in the middle of the year sometimes, because we've run out of money on the purchase order. So that's how it works.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions?
Julie, just to add some perspective, when we went through the budget cuts of 2008, the district undertook an effort to try to figure out how we could still continue to serve the district for less money. So we combined 2 full-time jobs into 1 full-time job, that of special services and that of human resources, with an understanding at the time, so this is going back, I'm going to say 2008, but approximately then, that if we needed to bring in support, we would bring in support to support either side of that equation that needed support, because you can't take 2 40-hour-a-week jobs, 80 hours a week, and turn it into 1 40-hour-a-week job without getting some support in there. So, you know, I just see this as a natural extension of an opportunity to support HR and their efforts to do the best job they can
Thank you for that
for the
perspective.
district.
As our old timer.
Thank you. Like around here when I started this job.
I had hair.
I had brown hair too. Keeps getting lighter. Okay, are there any other questions? Let's take this to public comment.
OEA President Charles Shannon. Matt, I appreciate that from you. That was one of the things that I was going to say as well. I also want to say that I appreciate all the services that Jen provides. She's an absolute professional. She also is very empathetic to all of our employees in the situations that I have worked on with her. And Jen, thank you. I appreciate it. I know you really care about the people that you serve here in the district. I wanted to say that understanding the essential functions and doing a job analysis is a real specialty. And there's a potential for saving fees that we pay to our lawyers. And I'd like to get it right the first time because these are our employees. And I know that these kind of situations are complex and emotional. And having the best person, you know, at a minimal cost, I think that this is money well spent because these are folks that want to hang in there and they're not ready to retire. And we have to identify how are we going to get them back to work and doing the job that they can do given their limitations. So thank you so much. I think that this is a very compassionate thing to do with the potential to save money in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? 2 action items on for action.
I wanted to make one more comment regarding, you know, my intention of bringing this up was just to clarify it for everyone's information, but also following up on Charles's comment about essential functions job analyses, which is here on page 44. You know, I feel like we do have a lot of work to do there, just in general because of the requirements of ADA. Having looked at how we post job positions, it's clear that it seems there's a big difference in the fact whether we have essential job functions listed for a lot of the positions in our district, depending on if they're classified or certificated. So I see that we do need to do a lot of work on that because I believe we're supposed to have that for every position, and I don't think we do. But also that's where my question came from about the $10,000. You know, it seems like we could easily spend more than that to do this, fix this all for us. Thank you. Thank you.
Items on for action. Any motion?
I'll move to approve item S, the contract with, wait, where did it go? Item L, the agreement with Shaw HR Consulting, Inc. for independent contractor professional services.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Last one is item S. Contract with Planned Environments to screen solar arrays at Glorietta School, page 82.
From the inception of the solar project, and as conceptual,
Stuart, I'm just going to have Sarah start just because she's
I'm
the one. That's okay, just because she's the one who pulled it, so I just want to hear what her concerns are, if that's all right.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, I pulled this because this is something we talked about when we approved solar way back when, in I think it was November. We talked about wanting to do some landscaping, and yet we didn't have anything specific determined. So now we see this on the agenda. I wanted to pull it because I know this is really important, and I know the neighbors care. And I also realize that we don't have a plan here in the board packet showing where, there's a proposal for planting 5 trees and we don't see where the trees are. So I'd like to know where they are. I'm also not convinced they should be redwood trees, so I'd like to hear some discussion about that. And I'd also like to know, if there's an opportunity for, well, we should have some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, or did you have some comment on it?
Oh, I thought Stuart was going to.
I'm about to
You were wandering.
say, I was wondering, I'm sorry.
You're back.
From the inception of the solar project, as Sarah Butler said, and throughout the planning process, we've been planning on doing planting in the landscaped area between Martha Road and the upper parking lot at Glorietta. It's gone through several iterations, a green screen, a shrubbery, trees of different species, and some other things have been considered to screen the solar arrays from the view of neighbors who consider the solar panels unsightly, and as a matter of keeping our promise to try to do something to screen the solar panels from the neighbors who were concerned. And as we weighed different locations for the solar carport structures, planting of greenery in the area adjacent to the upper parking lot entrance was determined to help improve neighbor relations and school beautification. We work with consultants from planned environments trying to come up with a plan, and they finally recommended that we plant the Aptos Blue Coast Redwoods, which are the same tree that's in that area, right next to where we're proposing to put the trees. So there'd be 5 more trees of the same species. And using the largest possible tree we could plant there, meaning a 36-inch box, and then the rate of growth of the tree is from 3 to 5 feet per year, so we would get some rapid growth and coverage. We start with a big tree from a transplanted tree and then expect that it would grow fairly rapidly. Also understanding that there is a change in elevation, as everyone knows, from the street level to the lower parking lot, so there's some additional height that's gained in by putting the trees where they're depicted on the paper I distributed. So we think that this plan, even though a little pricey, is a way to screen right through, because the tree itself has a canopy that's low to the ground, so it wouldn't have to plant a lot of shrubbery, which is also problematic for irrigation and so on. This price includes the cost of irrigation, which is about half the cost of this project. We'd have to bring it from down below where the school is up there, put a valve, an irrigation clock, and we want to put it in those locations because it's, there's continuous ground. We're not having to cross a driveway or dig up under, or make cuts in the driveway. We don't think it would be appropriate to put it next to the neighbor's house on that same side because it wouldn't shield, the solar panels from view. So the idea is to put it in a place where we get the maximum screening possible. So with that, we're asking for approval of a contract with Plant Environments for $11,417 for irrigation and 5 large trees, the Aptos blue species.
Can I ask a question, Drew? So Stuart, I have solar at my house. My understanding of solar is that trees can be the enemy of solar. So these trees seem to grow fast. My concern is that they will grow up and block the panels from the sun.
It's a good question, except that the panels are pointed the other way. So you will not, in fact, see much of the panels themselves because of the tilt away from, you'll be looking at the underside of the panel from the street actually. So you're not looking at the blue color of the panels.
What about debris of the trees falling on the panels?
It's far enough away from where they are and will tend to slide off and blow off. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I want to question that even though yes, the panels would be sloping the other way, and however, a redwood tree, it says here, will grow to 100 to 300 feet tall. We all know they are very tall. The sun angle does not just go horizontally, but starts further back and goes all the way around. So it seems like there would be the potential when the tree is full grown for shade. So, and also 100 to 300 feet tall of wind blowing leaves onto the solar panels. So I think that needs to be kind of thought about a little more.
Don't we have the same concern are all these other green things, you said there were other.
The same species.
So is that the same concern, I would imagine, with all these trees?
Well, the consultant already reviewed what the trees that are there and the sun exposure and said that the solar panel is just fine for the sun exposure of the trees that are there. That, by planting more redwoods, we're creating more potential, especially leaves blowing onto the solar panel. But, I'm just saying, I think we should think carefully about whether we want it to be redwood trees or not redwood trees. But we should back up. I've got a couple of comments backing up from that. I was just kind of adding that.
Did you consider other types of trees?
Yes, but it was, that was the consultant's first choice, for the need to have a fast-growing tree, one that had a big canopy, one that was would be consistent with other plants that were there. There were at least 3 or 4 other species that we looked at, but that seemed to be the most appropriate for the space and for the need.
So I just want to comment, as I remember the need came up because we had concerns by neighbors of having to look at the solar panels.
Correct.
And it, yes, if we want a fast-growing tree that's going to completely block the solar panels more or less by the time it's full grown, that this would work. I think there's some unintended consequences to this, and I don't think we have clear direction from the neighbors as far as that. Is this what they meant by, landscaping so that they didn't have to look at the solar panels? We're assuming that what we want to do here is completely block visibility of the solar panel from the street or from the neighbor's house across the street. And I'm not hearing that we have even, had any input from anyone other, the we that you're describing, I think, is the district and the consultant that you asked for a recommendation from, and it's fine to get a recommendation, but I think there's a lot here, and I'm concerned that, I don't think there's any need for the timing of this to have to be approved right now, and that has to be installed right now, and we could be creating a situation where we're getting angry neighbors all over again. So I think we need to think carefully about it, make sure that we have a good process before we approve something like this. And I haven't heard that we have done that.
I'm sure we will soon hear from the neighbors about what their interests are in this matter. But it is a fact that at a certain point, we invited the neighbors to give us some recommendations about what they wanted. We took those to heart. They included some shrubbery, which we did not include in this plan. But essentially, we were following what the neighbors said that they would prefer. So they've had, in a sense, some input to this. Hopefully we have met what they wanted to see. Maybe not, but we'll find out soon.
I guess I wasn't remembering that. You talked to certain neighbors, in other words, or what? Just because we had so much complaints before about the solar panel at all and the solar panel locations, I just want to make sure I understand how that went.
There was a picture of a rendering, sort of, that the neighbors provided to us about what they thought they would like to see or recommended be there. We did not follow it exactly, but it gave us some sort of direction to go in. So they did have a chance to give some sort of input.
I remember early on, when this whole thing came up, when I was talking to one of the neighbors, I heard that there used to be redwood trees there when they did the upper parking lot.
No, I'm sorry. I've been there 40 years.
Hold on,
It was
hold on,
just-
hold on.
We'll have public comment, but right now Carol gets to speak.
Well, somebody told me that there were redwood trees there that had been taken down, and they were promised to put them back up. And so this neighbor was saying, they never kept that promise, and I miss those redwood trees. Apparently, I didn't hear that correctly, so. Never mind.
Any other questions?
Well, I do want to bring up another issue, aside from whether it's redwood trees or some other trees or where they're planted. If there was, whatever the screening is, and this is something we heard before, but I want to remind us, if there is, more extensive screening of the parking lot, it also creates the unintended consequence of a parking lot that's outside of the view from the street, and there had been a number of complaints, or I received comments that there had been teenagers in the past who would go there and have that to be their teenage hangout. And so by creating it even a more private situation, we have to consider those things. And I wondered before, when we approved the solar, if we didn't need to consider a, what do you call it, a video camera, whatever they call it, security camera for that solar panel. And if we were to plant complete landscaping that blocks it, it may lead to that. But is that enough for the moment?
Okay, well, why don't we take this to public comment? I have a few comment speaker cards. Melissa, are you still here hiding behind the?
I'm still hiding back there, yes. Good evening, hello everybody. Melissa Petrosian. I live at 19 North Road, which is pictured in your diagram right here. I also am a Glorietta parent and a past Parents Club president. I last addressed the board, saw you all in November of 2015 when the solar issue was being discussed, and I represented about 20 families on Martha Road. And we were requesting an open dialogue and communication about the location of the solar panel arrays at Glorietta. As a reminder, it was our hope, given the unique location of Glorietta within the residential neighborhood, and as you can see, very close proximity to the planned solar panels, it was our hope that the district would be willing to consider a location other than the parking lots. As Stuart reported today, the project started very loudly, about 25 feet from my backyard today. Okay. So I'm here today simply to request more proactive communication from the district as the project continues to move forward. I promise you that the 20 residents on Martha Road have never provided specifics about what we wanted planted there. We very much appreciate, and I specifically as an immediate neighbor to the parking lot and the project, really do appreciate the efforts to provide some form of screening and some form of greenery. I really do appreciate the efforts to move that forward. However, we have not provided or had the opportunity. This is the first time tonight that I've seen the location plan, that I've heard of what types of plantings are planned. The communication simply isn't coming proactively to us as immediate neighbors, and you can hear, obviously, from my other neighbors the level of frustration. So I'm simply requesting that moving forward, there's an opportunity for input. To be honest with you, I'm not sure I care what type of tree we're talking about. I'm simply requesting the communication be more proactive from the district to the neighbors who are most directly affected. And I just tell you that it's not happening. And I dispute that we've had any sort of discussion whatsoever about the specifics related to this plant or screening plan before tonight. So, but again, I do thank you for the consideration of the concept, and I do just hope that before there's, this was on the consent calendar, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion, and I do appreciate the fact that we're given the opportunity to provide some input. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Just to speak briefly, we have certainly trying to make communication on this project, and we created a website page that I'm hoping is being updated, that talks about the construction dates and things on all construction matters that would impact neighbors. So I'm hoping that that's being shared with your neighborhood. We certainly have received some feedback on, not feedback, but we have received input on screening in the past. Whether it was on this particular resolution, I don't know, but in the past we have received input from neighbors on that issue. Lisa?
Lisa Toposhli, 18 Martha Road. First, I want to share my support for any kind of screening, and Carol, you're probably remembering a conversation, and you were close. When the parking lot went in, there was a meadow, and the previous owners to us, there was a plan that the district gave them in that half-shoe moon that was supposed to be fully landscaped. It wasn't all supposed to be concrete, and the area where Stuart is showing where the trees are, there was supposed to be landscaping. So you have a long-standing, there weren't redwood trees, but there was a beautiful meadow, and apparently the gentleman who lived in our house planted wildflowers in there. And there's pictures, and I had no idea what the loss was because we didn't live there then. We accepted the space with the parking lot. So you were very close. There's some residual mistrust from that because the other landscaping wasn't done. So I fully support the landscaping and the screening plans. In a meeting with Dr. Seaton and Stewart is when I learned that he had a piece of paper that had some whiteout on it, and that's where he mentioned that we're moving forward on it. So I support it. When I went back to talk to my neighbors, we didn't know what kind of tree it was. So I just wanted to talk today that, I'd like to ask that the residents who border this area and look directly at it, have an opportunity before any final decisions are made. And I'm just here to say, I received input from my neighbors who are very concerned about it blocking the sun. And when I told my husband what kind of tree it was, he said it will block our solar. And so how terrible would it be to have the project that we love so much also take our solar away, because they can get up to 300 feet high. So you're not hearing, I don't think you're going to hear from any of us. We're very excited. We appreciate the consideration. We want to partner on it. And we'd just like to see a plan, and as I think Sarah said it best tonight, make sure that there are no unintended consequences. Lastly, I'd just like to say that we're just trying to form a stronger partnership with you guys. I know that there were comments made the last time I was here that, well, you know, she doesn't show up for any other board meetings, and, you know, boy, she's got a lot to say. And I hope that you know that the neighborhood trusts your decisions on education. We trust all the great things that you do. Our kids benefit from all the time that you invest in the school board and all the things that you do. The only issue that we're trying to discuss with you is the matter that involves 100 feet around our homes. That's all we're trying to forge a conversation on. And so when I spoke earlier and was disregarded, and when Mr. Moran got up and then got up again while I'm speaking right now, maybe there's something I could get him, this is the only thing we want to partner with you on. We respect all the other decisions that you do. We're very well served by the decisions you make around education. But this decision around how the solar project was handled, you know, we just have some bad experiences, and so all we're asking for tonight is, we love that you're doing it, we'd just like to see a plan. I hope my solar's not blocked as a result of some of the decisions. So I agree with Sarah that if we could please move this out so that we can all sit around a table and look at a plan, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more speaker card, Susan Brady.
I didn't do a very good job. This year, both lines have gotten
Again, my name is Susan Brady. I'm at 14 Martha Road. I just would like to say, again, the unintended consequence of blocking the solar from my house, suddenly I would have, you might as well put up a stone wall. All the hills, all the things that were there and have been there for all these years, we would just see a green mass. And I pride myself on being able to keep track of what's going on in the playground, in the parking lot. On weekends, we're, you know, constantly seeing things that are happening, and we're able to call the police or whatever. And, you know, we want to be allies, but I feel like in the last year that we've been beat over the head. And it's like, we don't care about you. You just have to be on our side. But I really, the one thing I beg you, I look at these trees, these are going to block all our sun of our house. And I'm thinking about my roses. And it's going to block the traffic going in and out of the place. I see them on the side there. I mean, it's chaotic when you see the I probably know more about Glorietta School than anyone on the school board. I'm in my kitchen and I see it all. And I just feel huge redwood trees are a big mistake. The 3 that are there, I hate. So why would I want 5 more? Thank you.
Thank you. Charles?
Charles Shanoy, President. I too have been thinking about the unintended consequences. I have a condo and I'm the president of my association, and we've had a lot of problems with this particular type of tree. They attract squirrels, and we've had a lot of problems with the squirrels. They will go up and take the cones and gnaw on them and drop them. We've also had problems with our cars getting a lot of sap. They do get very tall and they do block out light, and I'm sympathetic to our neighbors who light brings me joy. It's one of the things I love about my condo, and I'd be sad to have my view and sunlight blocked, and I think that that could potentially lower the value of my home. So I've just been trying to empathize with our neighbors across the street. And I, for one, I was talking to Colleen and I said, you know, I don't recall there ever being an opportunity for teachers and parents and homeowners to talk about what are our options and work together on this. And I know that we've partnershiped on a lot of things, but we've had less of a partnership on this than many of our other projects that weren't as obtrusive to our neighbors. For example, like the play structure that our neighbors probably don't see. So I am really concerned about process here, and I'm encouraging our superintendent to really pay attention to this, because we really rely on our parent community. And if we start making decisions like this in the way we have, I worry that we're gonna start losing some of our support, both volunteer support and financial support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the public? Back to the board for discussion.
So I wanted to say we have heard pretty loudly from 3 neighbors that are immediately adjacent or affected across the street or adjacent. And they all want better communication, etc. I know communication can be time consuming, and I'm not suggesting that we have a long drawn out process, but I would like to make a motion to postpone this item to a future item and ask Stuart to contact neighbors and consider other trees and other options as well.
Matt, do you have something you want to say? Jason, anything?
I just say that spending $12,000 of money that could go to other causes that doesn't support the purpose that we wanted, which is to make the neighbors more comfortable with the solar panels, is probably not money I'm comfortable spending. I'd rather not spend it on things at all and wait to see what things look like so we can reconsider it.
I think I just made a motion. I don't know if you were going to ask for a second, Julie.
Well, I was kind of just in our discussion phase of trying to see where other people were on the original motion.
Right, except that, you know, it's Brown Act, or, sorry, Robert's Rules.
Well, we're not under Robert's rules.
Actually, we are. We have a board policy that says we follow Robert's
No, we
Rules.
don't follow Robert's rules, but in any event, I just was.
We do have, I'll look it up and forward it to you later. I'm
Okay,
surprised that
you
you're
can do
saying that.
Okay.
So you're saying you don't think you need to ask whether there's a second?
We're still discussing
Yeah,
it,
we're
you
just
can make your
discussing
motion.
it, yeah.
All right, well, I did already make a motion.
But we weren't done with discussion.
Yeah, that, you know, when according to Robert's Rules, if
We're
there's
not
a
under Robert's
motion.
rules.
Well, I believe that we are, excuse me, Matt, and I just wanted to say, I did make a motion. I thought there would be a request for a second. Obviously, no
Well, we're in
one's
the-
seconding it, or
Okay.
they would have done so already.
Okay,
We'll
we're
move
just, I'm trying to facilitate the discussion before the motion, that's all.
I'm concerned that we've got 300 pages of material.
I am concerned about that as well.
Yeah, me too. I asked to postpone it.
Okay, so Jason, I'm sorry, I forgot.
I
You said you
was
wanted
saying
to
I'm
spend
not comfortable
$12,000
with-
on
yeah,
something
$12,000
that-
for something for the
Screaming
neighbors
that
that the
people
neighbors
don't
aren't
want that
gonna be
type of
happy with.
screening.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to go back to the drawing board, is that you're suggesting?
Well, you were also saying, wait until the panels are up.
Yeah, I was sort of
Wait.
throwing out for discussion, maybe it's better to wait. There isn't a rush to do this. Let's wait to see what the panels look like, it may help us make judgment.
And whether screening and what kind of screening.
I'm hearing maybe screening isn't appealing at all. Nice grass and wildflowers.
So I'll second your motion, Sarah.
So I don't even know what the motion was.
To postpone this to a future meeting and ask Stuart to communicate to the neighbors, come back with some alternatives.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did you say aye?
You second.
Okay, so we are postponing action item, no, excuse me, consent item S. Thank you.
Thank you.
With direction.
With direction to discuss with neighbors and to, well, to discuss with neighbors other
Look at other
alternatives.
species and look at other alternatives.
I do appreciate the work that you've put into this, and I understand, that you were trying to move something along
If I can
in
comment.
time with the solar panel installation.
If I may comment, the landscaping is done under the same kind of time crunch that
Yeah.
panels in real time.
It's more the wanting to have something in place to facilitate the screening at the time.
We're trying to fulfill the promise.
And if there's other neighbors here, maybe you want to give Stuart your email address so you communicate it to when he does.
Okay, so since we still have LCAP and budget, why don't we stop
Lots,
at 10:30?
yeah, to do.
Why don't we move along to discussion item A, 2016-19 draft LCAP and public hearing.
Okay, so the Orinda LCAP has been on quite a journey this year. Better get a microphone. Thank you. And so I want to summarize that journey for you. Between July and January, we began evaluating the progress of this year's, the 2014-15 LCAP, and the 2015-16, I guess I should say, is this year. We have the annual update for the last year. And this included our analysis of our student achievement because we had the results from our CASP as well. And since most of our LCAP is focused on student achievement, this was important to do this analysis in the fall. We developed a timeline for this year's process for the 2016-17 LCAP. We attended trainings to keep abreast of the state priorities and the metrics for approving the upcoming LCAP. And we reviewed our LCAP goals and school plans, and those school plans were approved by the board last October. Between February and May, we adopted a new board policy for LCAP. We consulted with stakeholders, many of them, developing a 3-year plan and adjusting the plan to reflect the input received. What we have up here in front of you is the actual LCAP plan, and it also is in your packet. And what I want to point out that this year especially, although Orinda generates just $55,499, you know I always go to the penny, right? In supplemental funding, we still must follow all of the requirements for the LCAP. And that includes the process as it's outlined in the education code. We need to meet the state priorities and the county expectations. So as your interim superintendent, when I was in that role, I did take the liberty to make sure that we were following the process in Ed Code, that we were in compliance. I wanted to also make sure that our district and school community really understood what the LCAP was. And so to that end, we expanded the stakeholder sessions and their contributions. And we began that process for planning and partnership with our stakeholders in order to provide the equitable services for all students in our district. And although the state priorities require us to name and to identify programs and services for targeted populations, the Orinda LCAP really includes programs and services to address the needs of all students in all of our schools. The template has not changed from last year. There are components of the LCAP template that are required to be there. But for the purposes of the board discussion and for the public hearing tonight, I do want to take a few minutes to outline the important components of this Orinda LCAP. And so I'm going to reference the actual pages you see up in the right hand where they have pages. I know you have numbers in your board packet, but the public does not. So I'm just going to reference up here. And what you're looking at right now is the introduction, which goes from page 1 to 3. And we're not showing it on this.
I know, I don't know why that should happen.
Okay.
We can move up. Or something like that.
So page 1 to 3, the introduction, really tells the Orinda story. It tells our district story and summarizes who we are. When we move to section 1, which is on page 5, thank you. This goes from page 5 to 11. This documents the process for involving our stakeholders and the outcomes for the LCAP. It is here where, go on to page 6, I think then, so that we can see where it goes. Well, you have it in front of you, right? There we go, so right there. So it is here where you're going to find the involvement process and the results of our input process from the input sessions as well as our survey results. And this first section of the stakeholder engagement part focuses on planning for the 3 years. And then the last part of it, where you see the words annual update, talks about the input received for analyzing our progress for this year's LCAP. Page 15 is where we begin outlining our goals for the next 3 years. We have 5 goals and 3 years for each goal of projected action, so it takes us through 2018-19. The goals are at the top, and this is our first goal. Our first goal is student achievement, focusing on English language arts and mathematics. While we're on this page, I'll just show you that in the center where it says LCAP Year 1, 2016-17, you'll see some metrics for measurable outcomes. So these measurable outcomes is how we're going to measure if we've achieved our progress towards those goals. And you'll see that on every page for every year of every goal. So goal 2, I'll just run through them, is professional development. Goal 3 is student achievement for science. Goal 4 is student safety and climate. And goal 5 is instructional technology. But each goal will list these measurable outcomes. And within each goal, you'll see actions, and the actions list the projected expenditures. What we have done for Orinda and the process is we have identified and listed funding resources that we have available in order to achieve these goals. So you're going to see more than just the supplemental funding. You're going to see all of the funding sources that we have, including Parents Club, mandated costs, lottery, or base funding. The annual update begins on page 53. And this section outlines our accomplishments for this year toward the expected outcomes. So within this section, and you can go to the next page if you wouldn't mind, Teresa, thank you. On the next one after that. So here you'll see again we have the goal. I should just mention while we're here on the right side where you see the check boxes next to numbers, those are the state priorities. And so those are required to be there, and it's just checking which ones we're addressing. So when you look at the annual update, as I mentioned, we have measurable outcomes. So for this year on the left-hand side, we had said, you still have it in front of you, we had said, this is how we're going to measure our progress. And so on the right-hand side, we are listing, what that measurement was, indicating, how we achieved it, if we achieved it, pretty much just stating facts. And so you'll see that for each goal. We also, under the annual update, we listed what the anticipated expected proposed expenditure was and what the actual estimated expenditure was for each action. So that's what you're reading in this process. When you get to page 82, this is section 3. This is actually an important page for the LCAP. This lists our calculations for the supplemental funding. They give us very little room to put a lot of information. But we list the funding that we'll be receiving, which is that supplemental concentration grant funding, we received the supplemental. And then we also need to list what is referred to as the minimum proportionality of services, showing that we are increasing our services by a certain percentage. And this will also be available to you in Teresa's budget, that we're increasing by 0.31% in our proportionality of services that we're providing to our targeted population. So in preparation for tonight's public hearing, we have maintained a timeline and a web page and kept it current throughout the year on the district web page. The draft LCAP was posted on this web page on May 13th, and it's been there for 30 days. We took public comment from May 13th to May 30th. We met with the county to ensure that the compliance requirements were met prior to bringing it to you today. And we also received some recommended changes, minor changes but important changes from county staff that we included in this draft. And so our next steps are based on your board discussion tonight and direction. The Orinda LCAP will be finalized for the next meeting, June 27th. And once it is approved, it needs to be approved prior to the budget being approved at that meeting. Then it will be submitted to the county for their approval. That will be submitted to the state for their approval. That's the story of the LCAP.
Thank you.
Carol, do you have any questions? I don't have any questions. I've read every last page of that document, and I would like to just compliment Kathy. I was part of one of those meetings at coordinating council, and I saw what you did with all the various people who were there, and it was really well thought of. All the parents who were there were pleased and excited about getting to make real contributions. And so I just want to thank you for that. And I understand also that the people at the county office loved the way you put this together and said it was an example for everybody. So thank you.
Matt, anything?
Yeah, I think we lose money on the LCAP because I think we spend more than $55,000 generating it, but and I think it's a lot of make work. I think our district has always been involved in best practices, and Kathy, I think even before the LCAP, you've always been a huge part of that, so I thank you for it. I love the introduction as you've written it, and I'm reminded of it every year that I read it, but you really capture what's going on in this district. You capture why people move here, you capture why I was involved in the schools and why I got involved in the school board. And I just want to, there's so much of it that I'd like to read out loud, but I'm just going to read a little bit. Our schools take pride in the active parent involvement that is ever present within our district. Through the generous support of the Education Foundation for Orinda Schools and parent club partnerships that exist at each of our 5 schools, there is a cooperative spirit generated by enthusiasm and a can-do attitude that promotes excellence to support learning for all students. As a result of the unwavering financial support from our parents and community, our district has been able to maintain low class size averages through all grade levels. As reported to the state in our attendance reports, our class size averages are 18.9 for TK and K, 19.5 for 1 through 3, and grades 4 through 8, 22.4. And it goes on in even better language, but I just want to let you know how much I appreciate that it's essentially 3 pages, you're able to boil down what's going on in our district to its essence and put it into a document. I really think you just did an incredible job. The document itself, I appreciate it. Again, I kind of resent it because I see it as a template that's really not built for our district. But I think you've turned what I call make work into a positive thing for our district. You've gone out and reached out to the stakeholder groups. You've, by really meeting and getting meaningful input from people and letting them know about the process and where their input's valuable, I think you do make us a stronger district as a result. So thank you very much, Kathy.
Sarah?
So I also want to acknowledge, Kathy, all your work and the great job you did getting input and meeting with all these stakeholder groups that you did, parents, teachers, many, many stakeholder groups, and I really appreciate that and all the work you put into this, and I know you did it last year, and it's just a lot of work every year, and this year you did it following your role as our interim superintendent, so I'm sure that was almost, I do think it would be almost harder to just jump into writing the LCAP at that point, so thank you for everything you've done. And I did write in questions already, which you addressed, so thank you very much for that. I just had one question that didn't occur to me before when you first posted the previous LCAP, and I'm not sure what page it's on. But knowing that there's intervention in here, that's one of the things I had asked about. You gave a good answer about we have a 3-year plan. But since we are using the TK teachers at most of our schools for intervention, and now hearing that the state may decide not to continue TK, I don't know if that's in there in terms of the further out years, or is that in any way addressed, or are we going to wait and address that next year? Whether there is going to be continuing TK or not?
That is not in the LCAP. That's new information, and it hasn't been approved with the governor's budget yet.
Okay, so we'll get to that later. And then I did want to make a comment on one other thing, which is page 296, which is one of the things I did write in about, but I just wanted to point it out. That's the number 10 at the bottom of the page. This is the section on science. I'm all for science and doing more with science. And number 10 says develop a plan for the expanded use of the district nature area as an outdoor education program experience for environmental science. And then it talks about projected development planning needed, and I do know we have a subcommittee of 2 board members that are addressing the nature area in a way, but I just wanted to say I think that topic is going to need broad input from all stakeholders, and I hope we can do that. So I just wanted to say that publicly. I think the nature area, and also obviously the Friends of the Nature area have put a lot into it. I hope we can include them in whatever a plan is going forward, how to use the nature area more in environmental outdoor education. I'm all for that. I hope we can do that. And just want to say I hope we can include all stakeholders and include board input broadly too.
Sarah, they're being included at every step of the way.
The Friends,
Yes.
okay. But
Maybe he's gonna
my
give an
point
update.
is, I also would like to have an opportunity for the board to have input. When I say all
So we're gonna have an
stakeholders.
update from them in August, I think.
In August? Okay, well, but I mean, to me, this statement here doesn't specifically, isn't confined to the board subcommittee. This is a broad statement about in the wording in the LCAP. So it seems that it would include all stakeholders. And I'm just saying I hope we can include board input in that topic going forward.
Any other questions?
I'll be quick. First, thank you for the abridged version. Second, ditto on everything Matt said. He stole my thoughts exactly, both in terms of this document being a lot of required bureaucracy for the money, but that you've not only taken it on so fully, but made it a planning document that's useful for us. All kudos to you. Thank you. It's a lot of work. It's great to hear people reacting so well. And all the input. So that was thank you, comment, and here's my one question. On input, it sounds like we had great input across the board in terms of people coming to the meetings, and I saw some myself. On page 6, tell me about, and maybe we'll hear during comments too, tell me about the teacher response, because those numbers seem
Page 6.
page 6 or page 296 of the whole packet. The teacher survey results about the LCAP advisory.
269.
269, I'm sorry.
You said 296, okay, 296.
269, page 6.
It's 269.
269, yeah. Page 6 of the LCAP. The results below reflect the spring 2016 teacher survey results pertaining priorities LCAP. And then if I read it right, the survey responses were 53 responses total and fairly low percentages of each of the schools.
It was fairly low percentages, and this survey was part of the planning and partnership process where it focused on specific areas in science, math, and technology. So this was just one component. The other component was going out to the school sites and meeting with each staff and gathering input in that way, which is also in the LCAP. So we had the survey out for, trying to think for how many weeks. I think it was for 3 weeks or a little over 3 weeks. And, you know, we do a lot of surveys. So most important, I think it was fairly balanced across the schools. So it's data that really helped us when we went back to Coordinating Council, our LCAP advisory, to really prioritize the needs for pooling our resources together for those equitable services. Did I answer your question? I don't think I did.
No, I think you did.
Okay.
You have lots of surveys.
Page 7 has the themes that came through those input meetings at the school sites with the teachers.
That's what I was just going to ask. So there's the teacher surveys, and then there was other input. So that's what's summarized on the next page.
Kathy, I just wanted to reiterate, I mean, what everyone has said, complimenting you on thoroughness of this. And I was also going to say what the county had said about it. Carol got to it first, so you did. But really, it's a very impressive document, and I know the amount of time and effort that goes into it, so I do appreciate it. Okay, so this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open it up for a public hearing.
Thank you, Julie. Charles Shannon, OEA President. I want to say that many of my OEA members may not realize all the opportunities that I have to talk with Kathy Marshall. She and I talk weekly. There may be some weeks that we don't connect. And she listened to my suggestions about how we get stakeholder input. Surveys can be really tricky even within OEA. We don't always get a lot of people answering our surveys. We just recently had a survey and we had to extend the amount of time that people could respond, and we had to get our reps really, you know, saying, come on, come on, come on. And I realized it was towards the end of the year and that was crunch time for teachers. But even during the year, it can be hard to get a lot of responses. I also want to say is OEA members sometimes are worried about answering surveys because they're afraid if they say, you know, I'd really like to have some support from a math coach. Oh, yikes, you know, is that going to hurt us in negotiations? Will there be a lot of money put towards that, you know, is taken from negotiations? So surveys can be kind of tricky for OEA members, and that's not the fault of Kathy Marshall. I think she even extended the survey based on our input that, you know, maybe people didn't have enough time. We knew that surveys wouldn't be the end all, and so I had suggested to her, because she did attend one of our rep council meetings, that we also have her meet with our members face to face. So she went around to all the school sites. So she really went above and beyond, and I find that that's really her nature. I have had a great working relationship with Kathy Marshall. I have my own personal feeling about her and the work that she does. So I can only speak for myself, but I will say that anytime I've wanted to talk to her whether it's a busy time for her, she still will sit and listen to everything I have to say. And there have been times when we've spoken for over an hour after a long meeting because she really wants to hear from me, knowing that I do represent the members of OEA. So thank you, Kathy. I know it's a tough job. Sometimes when we feel we're not appreciated, it may be that a lot of folks who do appreciate you forget to say thank you. So this is my public opportunity to say thank you. I know you really care about all of us here. I know you care about teachers. You've demonstrated that to me time and time again. So thank you for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? So we'll close the public hearing. Back to the board. This is a discussion item only. Is there any more discussion? Or shall we move on to the budget?
Oh, let's
do that. 10 to 10. Is that what time is that accurate? 9:48. All right. All right. Let's move on. Thank you for that discussion.
Thank you.
And this is also proposed budget and public hearing. Where are that? Discussion item B.
The proposed budget is, must be done right after the LCAP. The two go hand in hand. The LCAP is the way, is our guide to the district and how we're spending money and how, what services are provided and how we can target students to improve the educational experience here at Orinda, and including many things like facilities and materials. So taking the LCAP and then putting it into numbers is what you're seeing between the two, the LCAP and the budget. Both require a public hearing, and I'm now going to go right into the budget. So I'll just be going over just the development process, budget development process, budget assumptions used, the assumptions used into developing the budget, talk about the general fund and the multi-year projection of the general fund, touch on what our other funds look like, and then just go through a summary. So the budget development process does start in January when the governor announces his proposed budget. And in February, that information is brought back to the board, where then we also talk about our budget calendar and going over our guidelines. That's also when we start looking at staffing and enrollment projections in February, because then in March is where the information is brought to the board as to if there are any budget expansions or reductions needed in relation to the governor's budget and the guidelines and enrollment projections and staffing projections. So that March is the time where we basically have a time frame to look at those changes, where we are continually looking at our assumptions and enrollments throughout this entire process. In April, the budget assumptions are also updated. In May, the enrollment projections are updated again. And we also look at the May revise, where the governor looks at the January budget and then revises it in May. That's why they call it the May revise. And I bring back that information to the board and revise the budget assumptions and show what the impact means to our district. In June, that's where we're at right now, we have the LCAP and the public hearings and the final adoption. And that looks like, what it looks like is tonight we're doing the presentations and the public hearing, and then the next board meeting we're actually going to adopt the LCAP and the budget, where the LCAP has to be first, the budget is next. And then once the state adopts their budget, I have 45 days to implement those changes within the budget. So that is the whole entire process, which starts in January. We're already in June, so I've got 6 more months before I start this whole process over again. Each district is required to adopt a budget on or before June 30th. So the June 27th date is well within our deadline. The budget assumptions used in developing the budget include our revenues, our expenditures, and looking at our ending fund balance. In the revenue side, for our local control funding formula, there is an increase of 3.61%, using an enrollment projection of 2,516 students with an ADA of 2453. We get to use, due to the decline in our projection, we get to use prior year ADA of 2463. We do have 45 unduplicated students, which are the English learners, foster youth, and students eligible for free and reduced, which calculates our supplemental monies that we receive. It does represent 1.79 of our enrollment, 1.79%. 1.61% of unduplicated pupil percentage. It's a rolling average that determines what our supplemental concentration grant is. And as Kathy had mentioned, we do have a 0.31 minimum proportionality, which means we have to increase our level of service based on our supplemental concentration grant services. There is a 0% cost of living adjustment, COLA, for the 16-17 year, and using a gap of 54.84% gap funding rate on the LCFF calculation. What all this means when we look at the LCFF, which is our largest percentage of our budget of revenue in the general fund, will receive an increase of approximately $298 per ADA, an increase over prior year of $626,000. Just to give a summary of what it looks like, we do have state aid, which is about $5.5 million, EPA, which is a calculation on the Prop 30 taxes of $1.9 million, almost $2 million, and then we also receive our property taxes of $10.5 million, for a total of almost $18 million, which makes up our LCFF funding source. Now, out of that calculation, we do set aside, or we do have to allocate $55,499 towards services supporting targeted groups through the unduplicated pupil count, through our supplemental. There's also concentration grant money, but we're not eligible for concentration grant money. So as I mentioned, the services will increase 0.31% in that area of supplemental funding and services. Just to look back, since we started the LCFF new way of funding our district, as you may remember, we used to receive revenue limit and categorical monies. Now we are strictly just LCFF entitlement. And as you can see throughout the years, I just wanted to show you what we're receiving on a per ADA basis and what the net change per ADA is, where it has ranged from the highest of $585 to a lowest of $120. I wanted to share with you just a comparison of other districts within our county, and I actually ranked them 1 through 18. Showing how who's receiving the most per ADA, and as you can assume, based on how the redistribution of funding has occurred through changing from revenue limit to LCFF calculation, that the districts with the higher unduplicated pupil percentage is also receiving the higher, is ranked the highest to receive the per pupil amount. The largest amount is $9,128 per ADA at Pittsburgh Unified, and then the lowest of 5,365 at Byron Unified School District. Now, this is a combination of unified school district and elementary schools. I did not include charter schools, but I highlighted in bold which ones were unified versus the elementaries, because unified does get a different type of funding because they have the 9 through 12. But when you break it down on a per ADA basis and you see where the disparity is in relation to the unduplicated pupil percentage, it really does tell a story. And then Orinda is right there at number 17.
So low.
Yes, and in fact, I want to have a conversation with Byron.
That doesn't make sense.
But see, what happens is you receive your LCFF calculation, and it is a glass full of water. That is your LCFF calculation. And if you have more taxes, you'll just have less state aid, but you'll still receive that glass of water. That is your calculation. But if you're an area that has less property taxes, you'll receive more state aid. So regardless, you'll still get what your LCFF calculation is. So I did want to have a conversation with Byron to see, why that is. But I just thought this was a good conversation piece to have, knowing that we are 1% unduplicated pupil count, which is the lowest in the county, which is reflective of our per ADA amount. So this really gives a big picture on how the redistribution of funding has impacted Orinda.
So quick clarification, that column that said per ADA, is that LCFF funding per
Yes.
ADA?
Yes, and the LCFF funding includes state aid, the EPA entitlement, and our local taxes. The EPA money, we do have to have a special notification on how we're going to spend the money. There has to be a spending plan, and it does get posted on our website. Our EPA, which is the Prop 30 additional taxes that have been assessed, is spent all on certificated salaries and benefits, because it is very restricted. I forgot to mention, it is almost $2 million, $1.9 million. EPA funds are not additional funds, they're just a piece of the LCFF calculation. They are due to expire in 2017-18. This is still on the governor's agenda as to there is a proposition going out there that are we going to increase the taxes or not? So it is going to be on the ballot. The board approves the spending plan, and as I mentioned, it cannot be spent on administrative costs, published on the website. It's only spent on teacher salary and benefits only. The initiative is on the November 26th ballot to extend the personal income tax on upper income through 2030. So, this is more information to come, but it is part of the calculation. And it is, we have to account for it separately and make sure that the board and the community knows how we're spending this money, since it was an additional tax.
Clarification, you said it's still part of the calculation. Are you referring to
The LCFF calculation.
the current Prop 30? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Other revenues, assumptions, other than the LCFF, which is our biggest source, we do have federal revenues which decreased slightly due to special education grants by about $4,000. State revenues decreased 36%, and that's mainly due to the one-time mandated cost monies. We received a significant amount less this year than we did prior.
And then also, we have a STRS on behalf contribution, which is something new that we have to account for, that takes what is at the state level and accounts for it at a local level. And then our tobacco use prevention and special education grants. Our local revenues are less 4%, and that's due to a decrease in interagency services between districts and field trips and donations. We don't budget them until we actually receive them. The Parents Club, EFO, and parcel tax are all budgeted on 15-16 levels and will be adjusted throughout the year if there are any revisions. And I just wanted to give you a visual when we do look at the total revenue breakdown by percentage. As I mentioned, LCFF is our largest portion of our funding. Out of the $31 million we received, 61% is LCFF. Local is 32%. State and federal make up the other 7%. On the expenditure assumptions, staffing did decrease 3%, and that's due to, we did have one-time prior year, 2 years worth of prior year compensation that when you look at the 15-16 year and you compare it to 16-17, it's not compounded when we're paying out the one-time funds. There is an additional certificated 0.20 FTE for an inclusion specialist and a 0.10 FTE psychologist. And then our classified, on the classified side, we do have a technology director who's always been a 1.0, but the funding source has now changed. We used to share with Moraga 0.40, 40% of the position, and now it will be funded by mandated costs. And within the staffing costs, STRS and PERS are increasing.
So that's why you showed him as a 1.0 for last year, this year, and for next year, because the contract is with us, and then we were just receiving reimbursement from Moraga.
Yes. Other items, books and supplies, it decreased 11.8%. This is due to one-time purchases that we will not budget into the new year, but if any reserves are used, we would move the money up to books and supplies if necessary. But we're just looking at the current books and supplies and not re-budgeting one-time uses from prior year. Same thing with services and operating, where it decreased 9.4% due to one-time travel and conferences and professional development that were through a block grant that no longer exists. Capital outlay for items over $5,000. I do not anticipate any items, and so they're not budgeted, so there is a zero increase, or there's actually no effect, it's just zero. And other ALCO is 2.1%. This is due to consumer price index applied to special education tuition to other districts, which is makes up our other ALCO. When you look at our breakdown of expenditures of the almost $30 million, 29.8, the majority of it is certificated salaries, classified salaries, and employee benefits, which make up 82%. Of our expenditures is related to staffing, and that's why I put a little box there off to the side so that you can didn't have to manually add up that. But then we do have the books and supplies and the services and other operating expenses, and then the smaller other ALCO related to the services between other districts. Looking at the ending fund balance. In 15-16 and then comparing 16-17, this is a projection because we still haven't closed our books, but this is based on the information we have, and then projecting out for 16-17 based on the assumptions I just went over. Our beginning fund balance started in 15-16 at almost $5 million. We had total revenues and expenditures of 31 million and 30 million, which leaves us an ending balance of almost $6 million in 15-16, and that's projected at this point. It will become actual when the books are closed and the information is brought back to the board at unaudited actuals in September. So if you take that ending fund balance of $5.5 million, almost $6 million in 15-16, bring it up to your beginning balance for the next year, add in the total revenues I just shared with you and the total expenditures, we will wind up with a projected $6.2 million ending fund balance. And when you look at what makes up the ending fund balance, I wanted to show a little comparison and show you where the increases or decreases are occurring. We do maintain an economic uncertainty reserve of 9%, but there's also, because we had more expenditures in 15-16 related to salaries and settlements, it does decrease in 16-17. However, if we use more of our reserves, that can change because we have to maintain. Our designator for economic uncertainties is based on a percentage of our total expenditures. So as our expenditures go up and down, that amount gets adjusted. So right now it looks as 80%, $80,000 decrease of designated for economic uncertainties. But when you're, the first item, which is non-spendable and restricted, these are all of our restricted programs and items such as our revolving fund, our vacation payout. Those are basically restricted, and there is a decrease of $209,000. But then we looked at assigned, which is mandated cost reimbursements, which will stay in reserves until spent. There is an increase of $468,000, and we do have OPEB withdrawal, which I have in reserves right now because I'm waiting for more information and also want to present to the board. I know I had an item to have a presentation on OPEB, and I haven't got there yet, but I do have this sitting in reserves until we can have more discussion. And I did set aside in 16-17, you don't see it in the 15-16 column, but on 16-17, the one-time compensation that needs to be paid out in the 16-17 year is equal to $622,000. So I want to make sure I set aside those monies. And lottery does have some reserves that has the potential being spent of $251,000. So when you look at what makes up the components, so we ended the fund, we're ending projected the 15-16 year with $5.5 million, almost $6 million. Our unassigned, unappropriated amount, which is in the bottom orange dark section, is $1 million. And then when you look at 16-17 and you take into account all of the new information, the unassigned, unappropriated amount goes down to $687,000. So it makes up the components of the ending fund balance. And when we look at the multi-year, because I have to take the current budget year, 16-17, and project out 2 more years, I wanted just to share with you the assumptions that I use, which is such items as the COLA and the gap for each year. What our CBEDS, which is our certified October count, CBEDS information, our ADA information, our unduplicated pupil count information, and the unduplicated pupil percentage amount. Those are all the items that I have to take into consideration to project out our revenues. On the expenditure side, I need to look at step and column movement of all units and staff in the district. STRS and PERS is still a big unfunded expenditure that is still not being addressed at the state level, but those have to be taken into consideration. And then I do apply the consumer price index, the CPI, throughout the 3 years towards contracts and supplies and utilities. So when you take all of these different assumptions and you apply it to, here just a little recap on looking at enrollment, because right now we do have a slight decrease, and I am in 15-16 CBEDS we did see an increase of 8 students, but projecting out we are looking at a decrease of students, of 21 students next year. Now, this will not be known until the actual students get in their seats and we actually get to count them, but to be conservative and to know where we're going, the demographic study actually showed an increase, and I just do not see that information. So I do agree with that, the demographic study on 17-18 and 18-19, but just not for 16-17. And as you know, with projections, as you go out each year, it does become more difficult. But we are going through another demographic study this year. We'll get an updated one. And also, just to give a little bit more information on the STRS and PERS, the employer rates. As I mentioned, this is one of the biggest areas where the state is not addressing, but we're increasing in STRS in 16-17 from a 12.58 all the way into 18-19 to a 6.28% of payroll. And as you can see in the orange area, for STRS, it's an additional $162,000 in 16-17, and in 17-18, 18-19, it's an additional $331,000 each year. Same thing for PERS. They're starting out in 16-17 with 3.888%. It goes up to 17.10%, which has an additional costs of $33,000 the first year, up to $62,190. And these are compounded over year after year. So these are really startling numbers when you're looking at that STRS and PERS are increasing, but the state did not address this. It's very disturbing.
They could have shifted it.
Yeah, they addressed it.
They shifted it to
Yeah, I was
the
gonna
school
say.
districts.
So taking all of those assumptions and looking at our multi-year projection, our total revenues in the first blue line, our total expenditures in the second blue line, and then looking at our deficit or excess of revenue over expenses, we actually are doing well for our 16-17 and 17-18 year for, we actually do not have a deficit in the first 2 years, but in the third years we have a deficit of $219,000. And then once again, I look at our components of the ending fund balance, where we do, which is the last blue line, is it shows that we do have an undesignated, unappropriated ending fund balance. So we do have a positive ending fund balance by the end of the year. Once you take into consideration all of the assumptions I used, applying it to our revenues, applying it to our expenditures, and then looking at the district 2 years out, we're doing okay. I'd still like to receive more money for STRS and PERS. Also in our budget, we are encompassing the 3-year mandated cost plan. I'm just bringing this back to you because in the LCAP we talk a lot about mandated costs, and we did bring this back and had a lot of stakeholder input that we did have some essential needs, and I was just bringing this back. This is our most recent, up-to-date, and as we mentioned, it would be something that would be continuously reviewed and updated and provided to the board as we move forward into this year's budget and then the 2 following years. Our essential needs came up to $683,000. Other options and stakeholder inputs was another $725,000. As mentioned in the bottom lower left corner, we did lose Common Core money, IMF money, and Tier 3 money. And I had a total, but it's not on there. But it was like 700, and it was on my other slide. But taking the information and the LCAP and input, we're able to address a lot of services and needs within the district. Looking at other funds of the district, because we do have more than just the general fund. Our general fund is the largest of our funds for our operations, but then we have other funds that are very restricted. Fund 17 is a special reserve fund that can be used for other than capital outlay projects. And we will remain a consistent $800 and almost $60,000 remaining in the special reserve fund, where we're only expected to receive interest income and at this time. So that's one fund. And the other fund, Fund 25, as you may know it as the Developer Fee Fund, also known as Capital Facilities Fund. We started the year in 15-16 with $3.3 million, and with the projects and keeping Stuart busy, by the end of 16-17, well, actually, let's put it this way. In 15-16, we started with $3.3 million, and I'm anticipating to end with $2.1 million in projections. Now, but we basically start off the year in 16-17 with $2.1 million. I expect to receive some interest income of $6,500. I do not budget for any developer fees. I get money here and there from homeowners that do projects on their homes, but I don't budget that until I receive it. So it's just so volatile, but regardless of the amount, it still is very restricted and can only be used for certain purposes. And once we know what projects and how we plan to expend it, this is basically showing you we have $2.1 million in Fund 25 for the 16-17 year that Stuart will be using to fund projects. And once the projects are funded, then you'll start seeing expenditures. Are they services? Are they improvements to the land? Are they building improvements? You know, whatever different expenditures we'll come up with. So my little notes there at the bottom. Oh, on the expenditure side for this year, we bought out our portable leases, and we did start new portables that they're for the one at Ragnar Ranch, and then we're starting on Glorietta, thank you. So that's what basically made up the expenditures for this year in 15-16. In Fund 40, which is our special reserve fund for capital outlay projects, this is where our Pulte money, our solar project money, and the Prop 39 energy efficiency, thank you, monies are held. So in 15-16, we started out with $12 million. The $2.9 million is basically our solar monies that we received, and there's some interest in there from just the monies that were in the fund itself. And then we spent $5.2 million. So I'm projecting to end with $9.8 million left. And for next year to receive some revenues and interest, and what we intend to, and how we intend to spend it in expenditures is yet to be allocated, but we have almost $9.9 million in capital outlay. So between capital outlay and Fund 25, that should keep Stuart busy in the 16-17 year. So as the projects are expensed, the budget is revised in the 16-17 year. Fund 51 is a bond interest and redemption. The county treasury, through our county office of education, basically monitors this Fund 51. I don't have much to do with this other than we close it out at the end of every year. Right now it does have a beginning balance of $66,000. I haven't closed the books for the year, but this number goes up and down a little bit based on closing out and redeeming our bonds and receiving the taxpayers' money, which I don't receive the monies. It goes straight to the treasury, and then the bonds are paid down. So this is more or less just for information only, and it has to be reported in my SAC software. But no matter what, all this money goes towards our bond interest and redemption. whoops, went too fast. We do have a Fund 67, which is a self-insurance fund. This money has been sitting there for quite some time, and I went and I researched back for when it started, and I anticipate to just close this fund out in the 16-17 year. And I've been using it for insurance-related costs of closing out any claims. But basically, this fund, it just needs to be closed. We have some money there that just needs to be allocated and can be used up on insurance-related expenditures. The only income I see is some minimal interest and hoping to close out in 16-17. I was trying really hard to find some expenditures that I could put in here to close it out this year, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But eventually, this fund doesn't even need to exist for us, because it's all of our self-insurance is done at our JPA level. It's not here at the district level. And we do have Fund 71, this is our final fund, which is our retiree benefits. In 15-16, we started out with $1 million. At the in 16-17. It's anticipated to be $788,000, and that is because we did pay down 6 months worth of retiree benefits in the general fund of $214,243. So this money is held in a trust. It isn't here at the district, but I do have to record it in our financial statements. So in summary, we need to monitor our enrollment closely because I am showing that decrease, and we are deficit spending, as I mentioned, in the third year of the multi-year projection, so we need to keep an eye on that. Even though we're receiving an increase in our LCF, it is offset by our STRS and PERS employer costs, and we still need to start looking at our 16, and we are paying our 16-17 contract settlements, but also looking towards the 17-18 year. One-time mandated cost reimbursement is assisting the district with the loss of the $766,000 in one-time Common Core Instructional Materials Fund and Professional Development Tier 3 funding. So, since we have that loss of that funding, the one-time mandated cost is helping us trying to enhance our technology and instructional programs. So this is nice that we're getting this money, even though they owed it to us already, but at least it's addressing some of our needs. So what remains unknown at this time is the EPA property taxes that will end in 17-18, the governor's final adopted budget, and I do have hot off the press that the final budget plan rejected the governor's initial proposal to consolidate all state various early childhood funding streams into one block grant dedicated to early education for the state's neediest children. The proposal would have also eliminated transitional kindergarten, a move that had drawn vocal resistance. That was hot off the press, so it looks like we're going more towards containing a TK program. So which is nice. I'm glad to hear that because I know many districts, including Orinda, has put a lot of effort towards the TK program, which was showing some great strides for the students of Orinda. So we do still have, though, the final adopted governor's budget. And I mentioned we will start in the fall with our collective bargaining for the 17-18 year. And how is it that the STRS and PERS future increases will be addressed once we hit our target in LCFF? We're just going to be receiving COLA, and the COLA doesn't even pay for the increases in STRS and PERS. So those are some remaining questions that we'll continue to talk about. And then, of course, number one is enrollment. When school starts. And I'll bring back enrollment on a continuous basis to let you show the progression of the students coming. And Oh, I thought that was my last slide. So what happens next? Our budget, the Orinda budget, will be adopted on the June 27th. The governor adopts their budget, has to be before July 1st. We have 45 days after that, so in August, I'll report back on how that impacts Orinda. Unaudited actuals come to you in September. That's when we close the books and you actually know what we did for 15-16. Where we will certify our enrollment for the October count, and then we start first interim in the audit report in December. And then, as I mentioned, January comes and we get to do governor's budget all over again. So that kind of went fast, but I hope I was able to address all of the concerns that are in our budget. That it's a very complicated process, but it addresses a lot of moving parts and any questions, and I know you still have a public hearing.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for all the information. A very complete budget. We have a board policy that says we end at 10:30, which I think we can extend. I know we can extend, and I think we need to. I know, Matt, you sometimes turn into a pumpkin at 10:30, but I'm looking for some agreement that we can maybe say we'll end at 11 at the latest and try to get through this since we need to. So are we on board with that so we can continue? Everyone?
And the remaining
Stay, at least a
topics,
quorum of you willing to stay?
and the remaining topics, you want to finish all the topics?
Yeah, well, yes, okay, so that's what I'm saying. So you have this, the end of this, and our meeting schedule. All right?
It's okay with me.
Okay. So, Jason, do you have any questions for Teresa?
I'll be brief. Thank you, Teresa, especially for the summary. Actually, the comment, which was already made sort of jokingly in before, and last year we spent a little time on the introduction because the introduction, I think, a number of us felt was a little rosy. I still think it's a little rosy. I'll make one suggestion: you should drop some concern and just say concern, because I think we have to be really straightforward here.
What page are you on?
On page 354, some of that's just a one-word jump. Later on, there's language about the retirement funds not being addressed, and I kind of agree with the comment. They're not going to be addressed. We're just going to have to deal with them.
They are being addressed.
Yeah, they've been addressed by giving them to us.
Yeah.
So I think we should just say it causes concern. I had, well, which is illustrated by page 365. I was going to ask you about the numbers because it was the first time in a while I'd seen them quantified for CalSTRS and CalPERS, and you had them in your summary, and I wanted to make sure those were the right numbers because they're really scary.
Yes, they are.
That's a lot of money. So they are the right numbers, so I don't have to ask about that. On page 368, we do see a lot of reductions, and for the state reduction, totally understandable, those are one-time fees. We're not seeing. And your summary slide mentioned the reduction in local, and that's what I wanted to understand a little more. Why is the local reduction so high, $445,000?
I wanted to share with you that it does break down when you look at the state report.
Yeah, is that on page like 373?
373.
Somewhere back there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And where it does break down, and what occurs is we do receive on local revenues donations that are in addition to what EFO
Right.
and Parents Club provides through field trips and other donations. And those are not budgeted until we actually receive them. And we receive quite a bit in field trip donations. And
so it's not really 57% down, it's that we don't budget them until we see them.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But are you seeing less field trip donations?
Mm,
Is that implied or not?
Well, there was, it's hard to say on field trips. If the school sites want to continue to do the same trips or something different or something closer or something further away. But overall, it's been sort of consistent, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint that, especially now we have the overnight trips and additional costs that may occur in staffing costs.
But that's what that line item is supposed to be, and process-wise, the reason for not budgeting until we see it, instead of just, estimating that we're going to be about the same, is why?
Because local revenues are just too volatile, other than that reason. And what I was trying to show was in our, in the SAPS report, I know it's not the greatest report to see, but it does break down all of the local revenues on page 374, which you had mentioned, where you can see any changes. You would see right from the first one, which is object code 8677, which is the interagency fees between the districts is one. But then also when you're looking at just other local revenues, which includes like field trips and items such as local donations that are outside of Parents Club and EFO.
Thank you.
Sarah, do you have any questions?
Yes, a couple, thank you. And one is just a request. I don't know if this already is, but could we put this on the district website, since there's some great information in here that I don't think is in there, like the mandated cost chart. Thank you. And thank you for all your work on the budget and crunching all these numbers.
Thank you very much. And the entire budget as proposed, it does get posted on the website, which includes the 3-year mandated cost plan also is part of the supplemental information.
Okay, but it's nice to have this overview as well. But I did have one question, and I want to appreciate the fact that you did this chart. I'm looking at the one that says 13, like slide 13, I guess it is. The one where you're comparing the LCFF by district. I'm glad you did that, because it's really interesting and helpful to understand it. There's one district there that just doesn't, Acalanes, all of La Orinda, we know is got low amounts of unduplicated students and therefore smaller amounts of LCFF, and Acalanes for some reason is up, near the top, and yet it's got 6% unduplicated students.
Partly
It
that's
just-
the high school district, so it has a higher student rate than like the unified, because it's high school only.
Right, I do understand that, but I also remember that Acalanes was working together with all of La Orinda to advocate for a better situation for LCFF before they finally approved this formula. And I felt, it just doesn't, maybe it's correct, but it doesn't seem right. And I just wanted to bring that up.
And the little the anomaly also in the Byron, just to dig into their LCFF and find out why. But this is what the discouraging outcome is from the LCFF, is how the disparity of the redistribution of funds has occurred. I took this off of the principal apportionment, which is the P1 for 15-16, This is the first time that the state actually puts out the numbers and compares. It isn't the final number for the year that they actually certify, so until those numbers are known, I won't know what the actual ones were unless I called up each individual school site and asked.
But, to be fair, we were also one of the lowest funded districts under the old funding model too, under revenue limit, because it was based on 1970 census data, and it was, we've always been one of the lowest funded. It's just the reality of Orinda, and that is why it's always been so critical that we have such high local support.
Right.
That's made all the difference for us. And
Right.
continues to.
No, I totally understand that. As you know, I've been advocating for better funding for a long time. I was just surprised at Akalani's, and if it's from a state website, it could even be a mistake. I'm not convinced that that number is accurate.
That's under the principal apportionment on the CDE website.
Okay, great. So another question I had is sort of detailed, but the OPEB, you mentioned OPEB somewhere, and I remember we get an actuarial report every 2 years, and I'm trying to remember, did we get that this year, or is that next year, or what?
The actuarial will be done. I have to wait till we close our books for 15-16 to do the next actuarial, and I hope to have that before we start discussions back with our Health Benefits Committee, and then also bringing back information to the board to discuss OPEB in general. I know we had it as an item on the agenda and it got delayed because we were like over time.
Yeah.
I think we didn't put it on.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yeah. And then my last question, thank you. So it sounds like we'll get an actuarial report after this year closes. Then I wrote down mandated costs for a question, and I can't remember now what the question was, but I guess it is the 3-year, no, I don't know, I can't remember the question. I guess I'll have to let you know later. But the mandated costs that's in this chart that you have here, are these all in our budget?
Yes, and in the LCAP also.
Okay, because I guess the part that's confusing is knowing Parents Club has agreed to make certain commitments of donations. And so, do we run that through our budget? Or it was confusing last time because it wasn't necessarily all combined, I thought.
Yeah, the mandated cost 3-year plan just includes the mandated cost, the district portion. There are a couple of items in there that show that we're doing like a 50-50 with Parents Club, but all the Parents Club support is mentioned in the LCAP plan as to the different areas that they're supporting.
And have they all approved, have they gone through all the parent clubs at this point?
And we actually received an email on the last one we were waiting for to approve.
But that's mainly reflected in the LCAP. The full-time director of technology is reflected in this, and our share of the mandated costs.
Yes.
So that's why the LCAP is so important, is in addition to the, $55,000 or whatever we get for the supplemental funds, we also have all the other LCFF funds, and it mentions other TFO and parent club funding. So.
The LCAP is a real important document because it does drive basically our budget because of all of the stakeholder input and discussion that goes in through all the meetings and dialogue that goes on. It's basically a true reflection of where we're spending our money and where we're trying to increase student achievement and the other priorities within the district, be it facilities and materials and professional development and community engagement. So it's basically is driving our budget now. Is the LCAP.
Thank you.
Carol, anything?
Thank you.
I'm going to open this up to a public hearing to gain input on fiscal year 2016-17 proposed budget.
First of all, Charles Shannon, OEA President. First of all, Teresa, I'm very impressed with how thorough you were in this report. I think it's one of the best reports I've heard. Thank you. I also want to say that you always make yourself available, and I come to the district without an appointment. Your door is always open, and when you are here on the premises, you always take your time to give me your undivided attention with a thorough explanation of anything that I ask of you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I wanted to say that I agree with you, Jason. I wanted to change that to concerned as well. Right now, our state employees' pension system is underfunded by $67 billion. 38% of new money is redirected to pay towards that. We also have $220 billion of retirement debt that is still unresolved how we're going to pay for that. I've been telling teachers that I'm very concerned. We've talked about how in this district, our LCFF funding is not going to be adequate for our future needs. I know my members don't clearly understand this. I do look at the budget. I have taken advanced training at CTA in understanding our budget. It's very dire. We're not going to receive enough COLA to pay back the STRS that's being redirected. And we don't get the LCFF funding that other districts do. We have had an understanding of why. We feel like it's not fair. However, I want to bring this to your attention. I was at a president's meeting with, our area is called El Costa, Alameda Contra Costa area for CTA. And I was at a meeting and I was saying how our increases, our raises are not comparable to what our neighboring districts are. And a woman that I know very well from Oakland said, "What's your top salary?" And I shared that with her, our new top salary. And she told me what hers was. And I said, "I apologize. You have a long ways to go." They'll reach that in the next few years, and they'll surpass us. The real challenge for us is going to be employee compensation. We're going to be able to maintain programs. Our parents will pass parcel taxes for that. I'm very concerned about our teachers. Our funding right now, when I looked, it was, we're up to about 2014 in the funding that we're going to need to adequately keep pace with cost of living. So we're getting behind, even with the raises that we've received. It's expensive to live here. I was from Vallejo before I came here, and they were funded at, their top salary was $67,000, and it's only gone up to $74,000. So it's still below. A lot less expensive to live there, I understand, although I lived in Lafayette at the time. I really recommend to Dr. Seaton that we have a budget work group that includes teachers, CSEA members, parents. We need to get the word out. People need to understand our budget. I'm going to have my members fighting me and saying, "I don't understand because they're not getting paid enough." And I try to educate my members, and I cannot do it alone. I need a partnership. I'm one of the very few people that understands the budget. I don't think everyone believes me that we should be concerned. We need to figure out how we're going to get ready for the next parcel tax. And we need to make sure that we all are on the same page and we all have the same understanding. I think that I will have your cooperation, but we need to have not just people like myself in this work group. We need to have people who aren't familiar with our budget, who can go out and preach to the others and say, we really need to understand this budget. This board is going to do what they need to do because we don't want to see what happened to Vallejo years ago happen to us, and that was they went bankrupt. We will not let that happen. I appreciate all the work that this district does. We have exceptional programs. We stretch our dollar so well, and I appreciate the parents for all their additional funding. We're doing good for kids, but I'm very worried about teacher salaries and benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Are there any other comments from the public? So I will close the public hearing. This is back to the board. This is just a discussion item at this point. Is there any further discussion from the board? Okay. So
I have to say that I agree with Jason and Charles.
Yeah, well, it is
Really,
concerned.
it's a problem.
Yes.
Maybe we should say serious concern instead of some concern.
Well, maybe we do modify that language to take out the word some. And just put serious.
I would say serious.
Oh, you want to change the serious?
I mean,
Page numbers.
we're just talking about the language.
In that introductory
It's first
section.
page.
Do you know where he's referring to? Okay, at this time we have discussion item C, 2016-17 regular meeting schedule of the board of trustees.
Yes, I will make this very brief. This item is on, yes, I know, on this agenda for your review, and then I'd like to bring it back with any proposed changes for actual approval at the 27th meeting, or meeting on the 27th, I should say. So as you'll notice on the, as you'll notice, this is on page 509 in our agenda. Most of the meetings will remain the second Monday of the month at 6 p.m., which is customary for us. However, in August, we did want to ask to move the meeting to the third Monday. That gives us more of an opportunity to hire new certificated and classified staff and give the board an opportunity to make those approvals. Because sometimes we do have a couple of staff members who may be hired a little closer to the start of school. And then you'll notice there are a couple of additional changes. April 17th, in observance of the Jewish holiday, we've moved that meeting, or we're proposing to move it, and then the 2 meetings in June, as has been customary in this district as well. So, if you have any questions or comments, definitely take your input and can make any changes and bring those back to you for approval. Or if you like this schedule as it is, we'll bring it back to you for your approval.
Thank you.
I'm seeing people already putting the dates in their calendars.
So just one quick question, April 17th, is that, I'm trying to remember when is spring break, because
Usually earlier than that.
it's usually earlier, and that would probably help it not be.
April 3rd through 7th.
Okay, good, because that was the problem this year, was the Monday after spring break.
And is the 10th the first day of Passover? Is that what the issue is?
Or was it called the Passover?
I know the Passover is still on the
April,
17th.
begins sunset April 10th.
Sunset April 10th.
That would make for a very short board meeting.
Well,
kept it.
I like that the 2 June meetings are a little earlier, because I think this late is a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually I run the registration day for Miramani on August 16th in the morning, so I usually set up the night before, but if we're done, hopefully it won't be a super long meeting, or I'll just have to figure that out myself.
I have travel on December 12th, but I'll do a meeting from afar. I
Okay.
don't think that's a reason to change.
I just had one more question. On the June dates, I noticed that's basically a week earlier than this year. Is there, which sounds good to me, because it seems that June 5th is going to be during school. Well, I'm not actually positive when is school getting out next year, but it's still during
It's
school.
June 9th.
Okay, so that is during school, which I think is much better, so that's good, thank you.
Any comments from the public on this?
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any changes. Like I said, it's a bit of a bummer for my own personal max day schedule, but I will figure that out. Maybe I can get in there earlier that day.
Thank you. So,
Okay, so let's just bring it back as is. I do do like the two June came a little earlier. I did check for other major holidays, so I think we're good.
Good. Always good to have another eye, advise.
And then the last item is information only, the annual board compensation report for 2015-16, which is the result of a grand jury, Contra Costa grand jury recommendation from a few years ago. So we just do that every year to provide that information. So now it's board reports.
I just wanted to say one thing quickly, and it kind of ties into the compensation report, that I also attended that budget workshop at the county office, which was extremely informative, and I guess they don't charge us because, okay. So I just wanted to mention, so there's another one in July after the final budget's approved, if anyone, well, whenever, I don't remember the date, but there is another one if anyone else is interested. It's a really good budget workshop that is done by, I'm talking about the one by Capital Advisors.
Anyone else? Do you want to compliment you on your first OIS promotion speech?
Thank you.
Yes.
Acquitted yourself quite well.
I got quite a bit of assistance from some friends around the district,
Very cute.
much younger than we are, and very wise.
And then, okay, you've already given your report. And then future agenda items, Sarah, I do have a note that you've requested a review of our legal service providers as a future agenda item. Are there any other future agenda items anyone wants to add?
Yes, the Nature Area Subcommittee would like to.
I think we have that already listed. Well, I have it listed as a future, I'm pretty sure it's listed as a future agenda item.
Well, we have Wagner Ranch Nature Area Board Policy.
The board policy. That's sufficient, or?
I don't think it's on there. I'd like at a future board meeting to just get an overview and update on the BaySci program. Just, big picture, how it's going.
That would be really good to have at the same meeting that we give an interim report on our activities for the nature area. Because there's some really wonderful fun connections going on.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. We are adjourned. It's not even 11.
Wow.